Much, Bill, for the introduction, and thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate Christ Church Cathedral commitment to making sure that voters are informed and to help to make sure that they're engaged in this process. It truly is so important for people to be engaged in local politics, even more so than national, because what happens here, as Andy said, is exactly what's going to impact them on a daily basis. So thank you all for your commitment to engage in this process. I would rather be on 4th Street right now, but we got to do what we can do. So my name is Fanon Rucker. I'll just very quickly tell you, I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. I'm a second-generation prosecutor and a second-generation judge. My dad served for almost 18 years on the Indiana Supreme Court and actually assisted the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office in prosecuting Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown when they were prosecuting them for their murderous spree here, because they actually started where we lived back there in Gary. I attended Hampton University, and it was there that I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and that was because I saw the Rodney King incident, and it was during that flashbulb in our country's history that I decided I wanted to be one who advocated for people in courtrooms with tall ceilings, with judges with long pedigrees. I wanted to be someone who understood in detail our Constitution, our freedoms, and how they individually impacted our lives, and we must protect them with the best of our abilities. I came to Cincinnati for law school, started as a prosecutor, did that for several years with the city, prosecuting misdemeanor domestic violence and DUIs and any case that happened in the city of Cincinnati, vehicular homicides. I then left there, went to the law firm of Manley Burke. At the time, it was Manley Burke, Lipton, Fisher, and Cook, law firms with long names. By the time I left, it was Manley Burke. And I was doing plaintiff's work. I was in a federal and state litigator, class action lawsuits, mostly plaintiff's work. Also became the assistant law director for a municipality, and I provided legal advice to several of our municipalities in the region. I then went to Santon and Hughes, where I continued my plaintiff's practice, but I also began to represent small family-owned businesses in state and federal court, employment matters, civil rights, police brutality cases, general civil litigation. In 2007, I was elevated to the bench, where I sat for almost 13 years. I wrote more decisions than anybody on the bench. I remained extremely active in the community because I believe that just as I note the absence of our prosecutor today, as public officials, we should constantly be actively seeking to be leaders for our community, not just in our positions, but in the community as a whole, because we shouldn't just be coming to people asking for them to renew our contracts every 4 or 6 years. It should be a constant about how we actually engage. And we shouldn't feel entitled to our positions simply because we've been there at some point. So I continue to be actively engaged in the community, creating community initiatives, heading up community organizations, fraternal organizations. I was a secretary on our state judges association when I retired from the bench last year. I helped to write the policies that govern all of the courts in the state of Ohio. And in fact, I just finished helping to draft our new statewide bail policy that the Supreme Court has advised that's consistent with what I've been arguing for the past 2 years and exactly what I'm talking about doing this campaign. So happy to see that. And that'll be the new law rules for our courts in Ohio coming up in the next couple of months. I'm running for prosecutor really very simply because we have a county of 800,000 people. We have about 200 employees in that office. It's essentially the largest law firm in our county. And we have a prosecutor who is giving part-time. He's literally part-time. Like he submits a written document at the beginning of his term and then is part-time for our county. And then part-time working for a law firm where he's earning money on the side. The issues are too vast, indisputably large issues that all of us tend to agree from a foundational standpoint. And my position is we deserve as citizens, we require and should have full-time attention to these full-time issues. Now, there are so many initiatives that I've created and designed, partly because I've been working on all of them since I've been practicing law, but also because, in my opinion, the best thing that we can do should be the best thing that we can do to address the burden on the poor that bail requires. We should be focused much more closely than we are on reducing our violent crime. We know that we've had more murders this year than in other years. We're on a record pace in the city of Cincinnati. And our prosecutor's office can work with the community and law enforcement to help to work with the neighborhoods and lower those violent crime rates. And I have been working with the chief of police to come up with some plans just to do that, and the stuff we've been working on before. Again, I could talk for, and I'm an AME and I'm also a trial lawyer, so I can talk all day, but I can just tell you that I'm happy to answer questions about the particular initiatives, but I have the experience, I have the passion, I have the relationships, and I have the support of a cross section of our county who recognizes that it's time for our current prosecutor to go ahead and retire or go full time at the law firm he's working at and let new leadership take in who's focused on how we address the disparities in our system.
All right. Questions for Fanon Rucker? Judge Rucker is obviously coming from lots of community experience.
Yes, I have a question. Fanon, what is your position on the death penalty, and how will you reconcile that with Hamilton County?
That's a tough one. You come right out the gate with it. So when I announced a year ago yesterday that I was running for prosecutor, I announced several initiatives. And one of the things that I announced that my campaign team all had stomach aches and headaches about later was I announced that as prosecutor, I cannot see, because of the injustices that exist with our capital punishment system, that I could not see a circumstance where I would prosecute a case with death penalty specifications. Now, the suggestion is that either I'm not following the law or that I'm soft on crime or something ridiculous. I grew up in one of the roughest neighborhoods that our country has to offer. Our family was victimized, my mother and my sister and I, with death threats. I was 7 years old the first time I saw someone shoot a gun, and I was 15 the first time I went to a funeral because one of my friends was shot in the head at school trying to break up a fight. So the idea of living in communities where we're afraid to go in or afraid to come out of our houses, I know it personally. And so the protection of victims or individuals in those positions is paramount to me. But with regard to the death penalty, we could have a seminar of 3 hours about the death penalty in this country, and more particularly in Hamilton County. We have right now a prosecutor who has put more people on death row than any other prosecutor in our 88 counties. I don't believe that it has caused a reduction in our murder rate. We have in our prosecutor, and there was an article that came out in 2017 that was a deep analytical discussion of the death penalty cases from 1992 to 2017, particularly in Hamilton County, by this prosecutor. And that article noted that Hamilton County is one of the 2% of counties nationwide responsible for more than 50% of the executions for death penalty in the country. Let me repeat that. According to that article, Hamilton County is one of the 2% of counties nationwide that is responsible for more than 50% of the death penalty cases and executions in our country, particularly with those years. And there was specifically in that article a racial component to the charge and to the assessment of the death penalty. Financially, ethically, even the individual who wrote the statute, his name is Paul Pfeiffer. He and I served on a committee together as judges. He wrote the statute as a state legislator. He served for many years on our Ohio State Supreme Court. In 2014, he denounced the death penalty. The person who wrote the statute in the state denounced it. Our governor is opposed to it, which is why we have not had any executions this year. There are several other conservatives who have come out very publicly, former elected officials and current elected officials, who are opposed to the death penalty. The injustice system, or the injustices in the system, are the reason that I cannot support the death penalty, but I can support the most harsh penalty that we can impose on others who seriously terrorize our communities, like Anthony Kirkland, who actually was the judge who they brought the warrants to and sent him to jail when he was first arrested. So I know the details of these cases. It doesn't change my position about the death penalty. I'm opposed to imposing the death penalty in my case.
Okay. Other questions?
Come on, I can hear you all thinking them. I can hear you thinking.
This forum, Christchurch Forum, we did a series a couple of years ago on the death penalty in Ohio, with some of the reforms and efforts to abolish it or get rid of it. And I was struck at that time by the number of people on death row who, the cases were not very valid against them. Several speakers of that were people who were eventually let off because there was not sufficient evidence, but they'd been on death row for years.
Yeah. So, I'm sure that everyone here has seen Just Mercy. And let me be clear. I mean, I'm running for prosecutor. I'm not running to necessarily upend the system. I'm running to ensure that we have a fair and safe and just system. But in that, as a judge, my responsibility in the several 100,000 cases I presided over, one of my primary duties was to ensure public trust in the system. That was one of my charges as a judge. In fact, that's our primary charge as judges. That's our ethical code. And I don't believe that responsibility to ensure public trust in the system is borne only by those who wear the robe and handle the gavel, particularly as it relates to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office is part of the gate to ensure that justice is actually being served. And it's always troubled me where we have individuals who are found to be innocent of the charges for which they've been charged. And we know for sure, I think I would at least believe that everyone on this call has the same foundational belief that I do, and I assume Joe does too, that we don't want innocent people in prison for charges they did not commit. I mean, it's kind of basic. And so the stories of those individuals who have been exonerated, some I've talked to who were minutes or hours from being executed for crime that they did not commit, not where there was sympathy about the crime they committed, but were literally innocent, or those who we know who spent 20 or 30 or 40 years in prison for offenses that they're innocent of. That's something that you want to talk about, help to build trust in the system. The prosecutor's office should and must take a role and be intentional about how we address issues like that. And if there's been one person found on death row who was innocent, it seems like that should be reason enough that we say, tell you what, let's make sure that this is not something we do lightly. Let's focus on protecting those victims and communities for those individuals. But the death penalty is a step a bit further than perhaps we need to go.
Yeah, Tom?
Yes.
Tom, Bennett wants to.
I'm sorry, I can.
Tom, can you unmute Tom?
He's not muted. I can hear him. It's just very, very soft.
Oh, okay.
I just wondered if Mr. Rucker, if you're elected, if you will forswear trying cases in the front pages of the paper before the trial has actually occurred.
So one of the, it's funny, part of this issues in this race is this is a rematch from 2004. In 2004, I was 32 years old. I was a civil rights lawyer. Joe and I debated at Xavier University in front of about 400 people. Now, I hadn't been a professor at that time. I wasn't a statewide lecturer, had not yet been a judge. I tried a few cases, but now a lot more solid in my engagement. One of the things that Joe was criticized about in that debate 16 years ago was his inappropriate, unethical pretrial comments about cases. One of the ethical rules for prosecutors is that we avoid pretrial statements that could tend to impact the pool of jurors that are going to decide the case. And as he was addressed about that on that stage, he stopped, he said, you know what, you're right. I realize how wrong that was, and I won't be doing it ever again. This was 16 years ago. It was wrong and inappropriate. And every time over the past 16 years, when he's going on the radio and he's called people animals, or he's in May told about the guy who could go and kill himself, or when he's made these comments, it's the same violation that took place before 2004, and it's repeated. And I'm always ringing in my head that comment when he said, you're right, I'll never do that again because I realized how wrong it was. And so you don't have to worry about me. I'm very strict about rules. Knock on wood, I've been practicing law for 24 years. I've represented thousands of people in all types of cases, been a leader in the Bar Association and legal organizations. I have never been disciplined or even had any written reprimands by any conduct that I've been engaged in all those years of litigation. I believe in following the rules. And so you don't have to worry that I'll be making improper pretrial statements about cases so that the potential pool of jurors will be impacted by those statements. It's inappropriate, it's unethical, and Fanon Rucker will absolutely not do that.
You've talked about the trust level. Do you think, it seems this is a particular moment in history where in this country, the trust level of both government and especially law enforcement, et cetera, a lot of people are doubting it. Is this one of the reasons that compelled you to run?
Well, partly. I mean, I certainly was in the race before, I was able to create a national pandemic and the largest social justice movement in history. Who could have predicted last year that this is the environment and the atmosphere that we will be running in? Who would have known? But certainly the absence of a particular voice advocating for what was happening in the system as a judge is very confining. I loved it. I loved every day on the bench. I truly did. But I was missing something. I didn't go to law school to be passive. I went to law school to be an active engager. And that part was missing because I had done it before. And so the louder that voice came to me about needing to be back out here as an advocate, needing to be out here and engaging, it motivated me even more to be a part of it. By coincidence, of course, in May, coupled with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and these other things that have been going on nationally, we ended up having, again, the largest social justice movement in history, where we saw thousands around here, thousands of people taking to the streets saying injustice is simply intolerable in 2020, asking for accountability. That's what people are asking for. They're asking for accountability, and they're asking for transparency, and they're asking for some type of trust to be established between law enforcement, our community, and the system. That's what people are saying. They say it kind of loud sometimes, and they say it in ways that can be offensive, but that's really the consistency of what people are asking for here and across the country. And certainly I was out there then. I was out there in 2001, but I was out there in 2020, and I was one of the people who they would ask to make speeches and to help to design the police reforms. And so, yes, I believe that having someone who can be a bridge. I do have the support of law enforcement. I do have the support of the community. I've been part of the system. I have some unique relationships that can bring everyone to the table, and we can design that system that we all can have a stake in, that we all can believe in, that's more reflective of our constitutional principles, which is the reason I went to law school in the first place. And so I have about 7 initiatives, and all of those have at their core that idea of building trust in the system, building relationships between law enforcement and the people. That's what is at the core of these initiatives, and really my entire walk as a judge and as a lawyer. So yes, that has played a huge role in helping me to come up with these initiatives for the betterment of the entirety of the county, not just a privileged few.
So in your role, is that where you would begin in terms of building trust, is with the initiative that you've set out?
That's correct. It'll be a continuation. So what I did before I became a judge, and even while I was a judge, was set up community initiatives, or even before, back in 2001, there were programs that I helped to design that even are still existing today. So as a prosecutor, again, is the chief law enforcement officer, is the managing partner of the law firm for the county. And that is the policy maker. So when we say, how are we going to deal with bail bonds? That's the policy that the prosecutor's office then recommends to the line prosecutors that are working underneath the prosecutor. When we talk about setting up a unit to review legitimate questions of exoneration of individuals in prison, that's an issue of building trust. When we talk about a better use of our asset forfeiture funds, so they're not going to, so they're being returned to the communities where that money came from. And it's actually a specific grant-making process to ensure that those who are asking for the monies put it to where it's going to be the best used, and that it actually will help to make a difference. That's helping to build trust. When we have a prosecutor's office that reflects the ideological and racial diversity of our county, that's helping to build trust. When we tell the community, look, you can actually form community relationships with your police department and help to reduce your violent crime at the same time. That's about helping to build trust. The prosecutor has the ability to be an incredible advocate And this prosecutor will be, because I have been. It's not an issue of saying, oh, this is the great campaign speech or great campaign slogan. It's the continuation of what I did when I graduated from law school in 1996 and have been doing my entire career. This is expanding the platform to help build those relationships across all lines.